This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard, hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for us on your podcast provider. Almost 750,000 jobs have been lost in the British economy since the start of the coronavirus lockdown. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show that more than 730,000 fewer people were receiving a wage from an employer in July than in March. That's when Boris Johnson issued the stay-at-home order. Our editorial column says the figures aren't surprising, so why does the government seem unprepared?
At the start of lockdown, the government was nimble and creative, keeping businesses alive and people in work. But we don't hear as much now from the Chancellor, who seems to have cut back on his artful photo opportunities. The Prime Minister has gone to Herefordshire today to be seen wearing a hard hat on a construction site, but that isn't going to help anyone. Where's the policy substance? What's being done to support more part-time working until economic demand returns? Why don't we support a new generation of volunteering to keep people occupied if jobs can't be found? The test of a government is how it copes with national disaster. This is a test the Prime Minister cannot afford to fail.
Our consumer business editor, Jonathan Prynn, is with me. Jonathan, we knew this was coming, but it still looks bad.
It's all beginning to shake out now. The latest figures, which we have up to July from the ONS, show that there are 730,000 people drawing a wage from company employers in July than there were in March. And the number of people signing on for work-related benefits has more or less doubled to 2.7 million.
But what about things like the furlough scheme? Have they done nothing to stop the unemployment rate rising?
No, absolutely. The furlough scheme has been an absolute lifesaver. And without the furlough scheme, things would be desperately, desperately worse than they are now. The furlough scheme has effectively put on hold what many fear will be a far worse jobs cull come the autumn. But it has preserved jobs for many millions of people for a long period of time. And I think credit has to be given to the Chancellor for coming up with the scheme and making it work. Certainly without them, the situation would be far bleaker.
But we do have the biggest hike since 2009. 730,000 jobs have been cut since the start of the pandemic. It's not over yet. What happens next?
I guess the key date is there's several key dates. Tomorrow we get the figure on the second quarter GDP, which is absolutely nailed on to confirm that we're in recession now, as if we didn't already know. But it'll be the official confirmation that we'll have had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. So that's how the economists define a technical recession. So that will be confirmed tomorrow. Looking slightly further ahead, various schemes that have helped keep the economy going will reach their conclusion over the next few months. Eat Out to Help Out, which has been another big success story, that ends at the end of this month. But more importantly, the furlough scheme starts to taper down and then finally comes to an end at the end of October. I think all the city is really holding its breath, and economists are just waiting to see at that point how many of those furloughed workers will be able to return to their jobs and how many will be let go. And I think the fear is that a very, very large number of them will be let go.
And the TUC is saying that ministers have to act now to protect jobs. But is there anything more the government can do?
Well, I mean, they'll have thrown the thick end of 400 billion at it this year, and that's not something that they can repeat year after year after year. We're just not rich enough as a country to do that. I think what the TUC and some others are calling for is an extension of the furlough scheme deeper into the winter, at least to further stave off the big job loss wave that everyone's fearing. But I suspect, my belief is that the government won't do that. They just feel that they've said on the record, the Prime Minister said on the record, they won't do that. There has to be a point where the government support measures come to an end. As I say, they're extremely expensive, hundreds of billions of pounds. And I suspect come the end of October and the 1st of November, that'll be pretty much it.
So is this why some of those economists you've spoken to are calling this the lull before the storm?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the numbers, although they sound bad and they're not great. I mean, the good thing is we were starting from a very, very low base of unemployment, historically low base. You know, someone of my age grew up in an era of 3 million unemployed for year after year after year. And we were down at about half that level before the pandemic struck. So there's, we're a long way yet from the worst position of previous recessions. But I think that the fear is that we're heading possibly towards 3 million unemployed by the end of this year or early next year.
Is there any hope for optimism?
There is. Some of the figures released by the ONS today were slightly more encouraging. The number of vacancies has risen slightly. And I think as the economy emerges from lockdown and people went back to shopping, people went back to restaurants and pubs and so on, there will be something of a recovery, and hopefully the worst fears of the more pessimistic city doommongers can be avoided. But it's going to be a long, dark winter, I think.